These aren't horror stories, they're real. From a woman with no memory, a missing man found in the most unbelievable way, and a trusted friend hiding an unimaginable evil. To everyone who knew him, 40-year-old James DiMaggio was a trusted family friend. For years, he had been close with Christina Anderson and her husband Brett. While Brett was away working a 3-month job in Tennessee, James became even more involved in the family's life. He drove 16-year-old Hannah to gymnastics practice, helped around the house, and was treated almost like an uncle, which is exactly why no one questioned his invitation. On August 3rd, 2013, James asked Christina, Hannah, and 8-year-old Ethan to visit his home in Boulevard, California. He claimed he was moving to Texas and wanted one last chance to say goodbye. It sounded completely innocent, but behind that invitation, a horrifying plan was already in motion. The next day, August 4th, the children's grandparents became alarmed after Christina stopped answering her phone. Hours passed with no calls, no messages, nothing. Knowing the family had planned to visit James, they contacted authorities. Deputies immediately drove to his home, but before they arrived, they saw thick black smoke rising into the sky. James' house was on fire. Firefighters rushed inside after bringing the flames under control. What they found was unimaginable. Inside the burned home were the bodies of Christina Anderson, her 8-year-old son Ethan, and the family's dog. At first glance, investigators considered whether the fire had been a tragic accident. The autopsy quickly proved otherwise. Christina had suffered horrifying injuries before the fire ever began. Investigators found evidence that her wrists and ankles had been restrained with plastic cable ties. There were marks around her mouth and neck, consistent with duct tape. Her right arm, both of her legs, had been fractured. She had suffered a deep cut across her neck, and investigators documented at least 12 devastating blows to her head. 8-year-old Ethan had also suffered multiple fractures throughout his body. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a robbery. It was murder. But something else immediately stood out. James DiMaggio was gone, and so was 16-year-old Hannah. Within hours, investigators realized they weren't just working a homicide. They were racing against time to rescue a kidnapped teenager. Authorities believed James had orchestrated the murders to isolate Hannah from everyone who loved her. A statewide Amber Alert was issued. Her face appeared across television screens, highways, and news broadcasts throughout the country. Every passing hour made the situation more desperate. Then investigators caught their first real break. Security cameras captured James driving through the Pine Valley Border Patrol checkpoint around 10 p.m. on the night of the murders. The search exploded into one of the largest manhunts in recent California history. Local police, state investigators, the FBI, search teams spread across thousands of miles, covering territory from British Columbia to Baja California. Still, nothing. Every tip led nowhere. Every trail went cold. As the days passed, hope began to fade. Then, 3 days later, everything changed. Deep inside the rugged wilderness near Cascade, Idaho, 2 horseback riders noticed something unusual: a man and a teenage girl. They had recently seen Hannah's photograph during the nationwide Amber Alert. The resemblance was unmistakable. Instead of confronting the pair, they quietly contacted authorities. Within hours, investigators located James's abandoned vehicle hidden in the forest. Its license plates had been removed. He knew police were hunting him. Even after finding the vehicle, it took another 3 days to locate the campsite itself. An FBI surveillance aircraft equipped with powerful long-range cameras tracked the area from thousands of feet above, confirming Hannah was still alive. Now came the most dangerous part: the rescue. Agents watched for hours. James rarely left Hannah's side. Any mistake could have cost her life. Finally, he walked away from the campsite to gather firewood. Almost at the same moment, Hannah looked into the sky. She spotted the rescue helicopter. Realizing help had finally arrived, she began desperately waving her arms. That was all the FBI needed. The tactical team rushed in. Agents reached Hannah, pulled her to safety, and moved her away from the campsite. James realized what was happening almost instantly. He grabbed one of the firearms he had brought with him into the wilderness and opened fire on the rescue team. Federal agents returned fire. Within seconds, the confrontation was over. James DiMaggio was struck multiple times and died at the scene. After 6 terrifying days, Hannah Anderson was finally free. Investigators later concluded that the murders had been carefully planned, driven by James' disturbing obsession with Hannah, the man the family had trusted for years, the man they welcomed into their lives, had become the very person who destroyed it. For Hannah, the nightmare would never truly disappear. She lost her mother, her little brother, and the family friend she once trusted revealed himself to be a monster hiding in plain sight. Yet despite enduring unimaginable trauma, Hannah refused to let that darkness define the rest of her life. Today she is married, has a young son, and has built a peaceful life in Vancouver, Canada. But the events of August 2013 remain one of the most chilling reminders that sometimes the greatest danger isn't a stranger waiting in the shadows. It's the person you've trusted all along. It was 2:30 in the morning. The roads were empty. The only sounds were the tires against the pavement and the Rogue River flowing through the darkness beside them. After a night out with friends, Mallory Perales and her 2 roommates were driving home through Belmont, Michigan, laughing as they made their way down Packer Drive northeast. Then, one of them looked toward the shoulder of the road. "Did you see that?" For a brief moment, they weren't even sure what they'd seen. It looked like someone was standing near the edge of the road. The car continued forward, but something about the figure didn't feel right. After a few seconds of silence, they made a decision. They turned around. As their headlights swept back across the road, the figure appeared again. This time there was no mistaking it. A young woman stood completely alone. She was drenched from head to toe, as if she had just climbed out of the nearby river. Her hair hung over her face. She appeared to be crying. Then, she began striking her own head against the pavement. Moments later, she started waving desperately at the passing car. Inside the vehicle, panic set in. None of them knew whether the woman needed help or whether they were driving into something far more dangerous. The doors stayed locked. Instead of getting out, they immediately called 911 and remained nearby until officers arrived. The encounter was captured on video. When Mallory later uploaded the footage online, millions of people watched it. Some were convinced they were looking at a ghost. Others believed it was some kind of spirit emerging from the river in the middle of the night. The truth was far more disturbing.
What the
No,
Stop.
I'm not. No, hell no.
What the
Oh. They were soaked.
Mallory later explained that they continued driving past the woman several times while waiting for police, making sure she was still there and still alive. When officers arrived, they found the woman suffering from severe exposure after spending time in the freezing water. As investigators searched the area, they discovered signs leading from the Rogue River up to the roadside. It appeared she had somehow climbed out of the water only moments before being found. But that only raised another question. Why? Investigators soon learned the woman was from Kalamazoo, more than 60 miles away, yet she had no memory of how she reached Belmont. She couldn't remember driving there. She couldn't remember entering the river. She couldn't even explain why she was wandering alone in the middle of the night. One possible explanation began to emerge. Authorities believe she may have experienced a rare condition known as a dissociative fugue state. During a fugue state, a person can suddenly lose autobiographical memory, travel long distances, and behave completely out of character. often without realizing anything is wrong. When the episode ends, many people remember little or nothing about what happened. Investigators later located her vehicle, parked behind a random home, just east of the river. She had apparently driven there herself, then vanished into the darkness. Exactly what happened after that remains unknown. Hoping to understand more, Mallory shared the video in a local Facebook group. Some nearby residents said the screams heard that night were probably coyotes, but others described encounters that painted a much stranger picture. One person claimed they had seen the same woman hours earlier near Packer Woods. They stopped and asked if she needed help. She calmly replied, "No," then continued walking alone into the night. Another resident reported hearing about a woman entering a nearby house, calling out, "Hello?" several times before quietly leaving again. Piece by piece, a timeline began to form. For hours, she appeared to have wandered through unfamiliar neighborhoods, confused, lost, and completely disconnected from reality. Mallory tried contacting both the hospital and local police, hoping to learn who the woman was. Neither agency released her identity. Based on publicly available information, many believe she may have been a 28-year-old woman from Kalamazoo who disappeared just days earlier. Before she vanished, she reportedly told friends she believed someone she met online was following her. Whether that fear was real or the result of overwhelming psychological distress has never been publicly confirmed. If investigators are correct, the stress may have triggered the fugue state that left her wandering more than 60 miles from home with no memory of how she got there. Thankfully, she survived, but the footage still unsettles people years later. Not because it shows something supernatural, but because it captures something that's painfully real. A woman emerging from a freezing river in the middle of the night, unable to remember where she'd been, how she'd gotten there, or why she was desperately waving for help in the darkness. Sometimes, the scariest thing you can lose isn't your way home, it's your own memory. On May 27, 2013, at around 4 p.m., 73-year-old Robert McDunn vanished from his home in Portland, Maine. At first, it sounded like another missing persons case, but this one came with a terrifying reality. Robert wasn't just elderly, he was living with dementia. For someone with dementia, getting lost isn't simply taking a wrong turn. It's waking up in a world where nothing makes sense, where familiar streets become strangers, where loved ones become unfamiliar faces, and where even your own home can feel like a place you've never seen before. Every minute that passes becomes more dangerous than the last. A healthy adult might survive a night alone, but for someone who can't remember where they are, or even who they are, the clock becomes their greatest enemy. Robert could have wandered into traffic, collapsed somewhere no one would ever think to look, or frozen to death alone, confused and terrified. Police understood the urgency immediately. Within hours, search teams flooded the area. K9 units searched the woods. ATVs combed rough terrain. Helicopters scanned from above. GPS mapping technology tracked every section that had already been searched.
Search and rescue teams spent more than 14 hours searching an area of Leamington after 73-year-old Robert McDonough, who has dementia, disappeared Monday afternoon. Around 6 a.m., search teams were briefed and started to intensify their effort.
It was going into the second operational period, which means we're starting to ramp up, using a lot of GPS technology. Well, again, we'd have our pilots, we'd have ATVs, K9s.
Through the night, dozens of volunteers refused to give up. But finding someone with dementia is unlike searching for anyone else. They often don't realize they're lost. Instead of calling for help, they simply keep walking, sometimes in circles, sometimes miles away from where they started. Every decision they make is driven by confusion, not logic. Hour after hour, the search produced nothing. As darkness swallowed the city, hope slowly began to fade. Robert had now spent an entire night alone, cold, vulnerable, completely unaware of the danger surrounding him. By the next morning, the search entered its second operational period. Teams intensified their efforts. More volunteers arrived, more ground was covered. But no matter where they looked, there was still no sign of Robert. Then, roughly 14 hours after he disappeared, something happened that no one could have predicted. At 6:30 that morning, a local television news crew was filming a live report about Robert's disappearance. The reporter stood on the sidewalk, speaking directly into the camera, explaining that search crews were still desperately trying to find the missing 73-year-old. Then, out of nowhere, an elderly man quietly walked into the background of the shot. At first, no one paid attention. He looked like any other passerby. The reporter continued speaking, the cameraman kept recording. But after a few seconds, someone looked a little closer. The man looked familiar. Very familiar. The reporter stopped. His expression changed instantly. He turned toward the elderly stranger and asked a simple question. "Sir, what's your name?" The man answered, "Bob." The reporter froze.
Anybody give a phone call?
Calling the warden service there to Farmington. This is Bob. This is you identify him as Bob McDonough?
I think so. It's Bob McDonough. Yeah.
He looks a lot like a
Watch
guy.
yourself.
Yeah.
Watch yourself.
Yeah. It's Bob McDonough.
Search posters, police briefings, photographs shown across every news station, they all flashed through his mind. This wasn't just a random pedestrian. This was Robert McDunn, the very man the entire city had spent the entire night searching for, had unknowingly walked straight into the middle of a live television broadcast about his own disappearance. The news crew immediately contacted police. Officers rushed to the scene and incredibly, Robert was found alive, despite wandering through the night. He had somehow survived the cold without serious injury. It was a miraculous ending to a search that could have ended in tragedy. But Robert's story also revealed something deeply unsettling. Sometimes, people don't disappear because they want to. Sometimes, their own minds slowly erase the path home. And somewhere, while the entire world is searching for them, they don't even realize they're lost.